Good to go.
Good evening. This is the ordinary meeting of the Council on the 22nd of February 2022, held via remote technology. I now hand you over to our Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Rosemary Dillon.
Thank you, Storm. Good evening, councillors, staff and Blue Mountains community. Welcome to this ordinary meeting of the Blue Mountains City Council. This meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed. An audio file and a link to a live stream is available from the Council's website. The audio recording will be available on the website for 6 months after the upload date. As all statements made at this meeting will be recorded, your image and voice may be recognised and other people may be aware that you have attended the meeting. Your continued attendance at the meeting after this statement is made is taken as your consent to your image and voice being webcast. All persons in attendance at this meeting, whether addressing the council or making comments that may be detected by the recording equipment, should refrain from making any defamatory comments or from releasing any personal or confidential information about another individual without that other individual's consent. The council is not responsible for the statements of any individual made during this meeting. Any defamatory statements or any statements which include personal or confidential information are the sole responsibility of the individual who makes them. The Council's Code of Meeting Practice sets standards of conduct for a council meeting. If any person in attendance at the meeting acts in a disorderly manner, or if a person makes defamatory or unacceptable comments, then the meeting may be interrupted by the Mayor or by me, the Chief Executive Officer, and appropriate action taken. This meeting must not be recorded by any party other than the Council. Members of the public have been invited to provide submissions to items on the meeting agenda in advance, and any submissions received have already been provided to the councillors. I now ask you to please welcome the Mayor.
Thank you. Dear God, we sincerely seek your blessing on this council so that its deliberations may advance your glory and the true welfare of the people of the City of Blue Mountains. The City of Blue Mountains is located within the country of the Darug and Gundungurra peoples. The Blue Mountain City Council recognises that Darug and Gundungurra traditional owners have a deep and continuous connection to their country, and that this is of great cultural significance to Aboriginal people, both locally and in the region. For Darug and Gundungurra people, Ungara takes in everything within the physical, cultural and spiritual landscape: landforms, waters, air, trees, rocks, plants, animals, foods, medicines, minerals, stories and special places. It includes cultural practice, kinship, knowledge, songs, stories and art, as well as spiritual beings and people, past, present and future. Blue Mountain City Council pays respect to elders past and present, while recognising the strength, capacity and resilience of past and present Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Blue Mountains region. Good evening, councillors. I have one apology standing in the name of Councillor Kevin Schreiber. I have a motion to accept that apology. It's moved Councillor Fells, seconded Councillor Redshaw. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Declarations, firstly, confirmation of the minutes held on 25 January. It's moved Councillor Fells, seconded Councillor Hua. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried. And I shall sign those minutes off on the 22nd of the 2nd, 22. We now have declarations of interest. Are there any declarations to be made? Show me your hands. Councillor Hollywood with a declaration of interest.
I just wanted to acknowledge that in relation to item 23, that the applicant did reach out to contact me, but I will be staying in the room and it was only a brief conversation.
I take that as a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest. In relation to item 23, a representative of the applicant did reach out to me. We had a 3-minute conversation. I referred the applicant to Councillor Hollywood. Nothing of substance was discussed. I consider that a non-significant, non-pecuniary conflict of interest, and I will also remain in the room. Are there any other declarations? There being none, thank you. We'll move on now to mayoral minutes. The first mayoral minute by me relates to the no curfew airport at Badgerys Creek. It's moved me, seconded the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Hollywood, and I'll speak to it. Councillors, and I know the clock will start now. We have a long and well-established position in relation to Western Sydney Airport. It's well known this council has expressed its opposition to the airport in the past, and this resolution commits to that. More importantly, or not more importantly, but equally importantly, this resolution focuses on some social justice issues as well. There is no doubt that a no curfew airport in Western Sydney treats the people of Western Sydney differently to the people elsewhere in Sydney. And that is another factor that we need to consider. Furthermore, the airport at Western Sydney will have a deleterious impact on the city of Blue Mountains. Now, our council, because we were invited to 2 terms ago, put in a submission to the EIS. That was a professionally crafted submission, and it showed the profound impacts the airport would have on the city of Blue Mountains. And I mean, whether you oppose the airport as I do, or whether you support it, there's no doubt that the council put in a well-crafted submission. Now, I hear people say that us adopting a position on this is wasting ratepayers' money on a federal issue. We haven't spent any money on this matter for 2 terms, and it costs us nothing to take a position tonight and for that position to be our policy position in all discussions we're invited to in the future. I want to focus this speech on something, and that is the lack of flight paths. The airport will start operation in 2026, and yet we still don't know where the planes will fly. We were promised flight paths in 2018, 2019, 2020, then 2021, then 2022, and on the irrelevant website, at the height of the Omicron outbreak in December in New South Wales, the government slipped something up on the website to say that we will now not see the flight paths until the middle of 2023, conveniently after the state election. So the federal election, the council election is unafflicted by the reality of the airport. The federal election will be unafflicted by the reality of the airport, and now the state election will be unafflicted by the reality of the airport. The fact is, right now the airport's a concept. We've got a terminal, we've got runways, we've got roads. You can go out and tour it. It's just like that episode from Yes Minister. The most efficient hospital in Britain was a hospital with no patients. This fantastic airport is awesome. We just don't know where the planes are going to fly. And on the latest proposal of releasing flight paths in mid-2023, the community will get to know when the flight paths, or what the flight paths are, who's going to be impacted and how much, 2.5 years before the planes start to fly. 2.5 years before the planes start to fly is when the community gets a chance to have a say on the flight paths. After the darn thing's built, after the runway orientation is locked in, and after there is any possibility of arguing for change. Now, I think, and it's just my opinion, that the non-release of the flight paths is political. It's about avoiding difficult elections, but it's also strategic. Back 20 years ago, when I was the president of Wesrock and we defeated this proposal, it was all based on the community's horror at the flight paths. And in 2015, when the draft flight paths were released, the hue and cry were so great, they were placed in witness protection, and we've never seen them since. The government's learned the lessons of the past. They don't want these flight paths to come out until elections are passed and until it's too darn late to do anything about it. Well, I call that out. And this resolution doesn't just reaffirm our opposition to an airport at Western Sydney, which it does, but it focuses on the injustice of a 24/7 airport here when Sydney doesn't face that. And it focuses on the injustice of us not knowing where the flight paths will be until 2.5 years before the planes start to fly. It's important at the beginning of this new term of council that we recommit to policy positions and don't assume that new councillors hold the same views as former councillors. But I put this resolution to you and I'll ask the Deputy Mayor if she wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst you've said a lot and covered off the main points, I did want to highlight that one of the things that really has struck me in these last few months through the election campaign is how many people are putting some kind of trust in the government that it's a no-brainer that there will be a curfew. And when I say to people, no, there is no curfew, nothing has been announced about a curfew, there are no flight paths, there is no curfew, don't think that you're going to get that just because that seems reasonable. And if you were going to get it, why wouldn't the flight paths be released now? So I do think that it's dragged on and on and on, that people have almost sort of started to kind of envision what they think might be reasonable, but that is absolutely not on the agenda from a policy perspective in terms of what the government is proposing. In fact, they've released, when you look at some of the reports, that the whole economics and the economic viability of this terrible airport is actually based on it having not having a curfew and being a 24/7 airport. So I really welcome this mayoral minute and reaffirming our positions. And I would like to say on the following too as well, that I think it's really important because, in fact, we had a number of candidates, some of whom are now have been elected, who didn't actually complete the Conservation Society's survey in the lead up to the election. So I think it'll be really good to actually know where people do stand on these issues. I mean, that's all about community transparency. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we think about the community that we serve, we think about what its values are. What the people of the Blue Mountains want more than anything is their quality of life. That's why we live here. That's why we commute long distances. The community survey tells us that this is important to them. Here now, we have a government that has point blank refused for not a small number of years to outline where the planes will fly that will directly affect that quality of life. The runway alignment has been known for a very long time. Hundreds and millions of tonnes of dirt have been shifted in pursuit of that runway alignment and the construction of the airport. It is unthinkable. It is a slap in the face to every citizen of Western Sydney and the Blue Mountains to think that the government has not put thought to where the planes will fly. Sydney's aerospace architecture is remarkably cluttered. For Mascot, RAF Richmond, Bankstown and Camden. All these aircraft must fly in safety. Now we enter a new player in Western Sydney Airport. And those planes, I'm sure, will fly in safety because that's the rules. But they won't tell us what that equates to. That means, as you correctly said, it means that those planes are intended to fly over the Blue Mountains. They just don't want to risk the federal seat of Macquarie. Well, I think that's not good enough. And that is one of several reasons why, after 28 proud years, I resigned from the Liberal Party. And I would have nothing to do with a government that was so lazy and acted with such malfeasance towards the people whose votes it will seek to cultivate in a very short space of time. But malfeasance doesn't just come now. It has always been there since the EIS was written. And let me just read it to you, the key part that has always stuck with me. Health risks are predicted to increase the risk of mortality, hospital admissions, emergency department attendances. However, these risks are very small when compared to health impacts from existing air pollution in Sydney. Those are the words of a government that says there's dirty air in Western Sydney because the morning breezes, the onshore winds push what smog there is into Western Sydney and the inversion layers tend to keep it there. So there's already bad air in Western Sydney, and Western Sydney is a hotspot for respiratory illnesses. And mortality, people dying, is going to increase. That's not the words of a responsible government, Mr. Mayor. That's the words of a psychopath. That is someone who does not care about the very same people whose votes they're going to seek to cultivate in a short space of time. You would laugh if it wasn't so serious. The government is saying more people will die, but it's only a small number of people. So there you go, it's a good idea. Well, let's turn to the idea of what it's in support of. They say jobs. I think they sell the same jobs to us, Penrith, to Blacktown, to Parramatta, Liverpool and to Campbelltown. But anyway, they say that there's jobs. Let's talk about jobs in the Blue Mountains. In 2015, the historically high unemployment rate in the Blue Mountains crashed when the highway was finally finished. Because tourism boomed, because midweek attendances and overnight stays, which had always been very weak, suddenly became much, much stronger. And unemployment in the Blue Mountains, and please, I urge all councillors to Google this because the Blue Mountains Economic Enterprise kept statistics. They are the ones, they show very clearly that Blue Mountains unemployment went lower than Sydney, Australia, or the rest of New South Wales. That's going to change if there's a 24-hour airport noise above the heads of people who will be coming here to see the beautiful sights. Everyone says this is a very pristine and beautiful and precious area, but there's a federal government that is not acting that way. It just doesn't want you to know about it. When I was in the Liberal Party, Mr Mayor, one of the things that I received the most, and former Councillor Vanderklay received the most serious criticism for, was our opposition.
1 minute.
Thank you. Our opposition to Western Sydney Airport and our participation in campaigns against it. Every single dollar towards that is money well spent, because it will assist the sleeping patterns of the people of the Blue Mountains, and such campaigns may actually reduce the mortality if we can focus the agenda on the air pollution that jet planes will cause in Western Sydney. The Liberal Party, Mr Mayor, once cared about the people of Western Sydney. It doesn't care about them anymore. Kerry Bartlett and Jackie Kelly once fought for their constituents. I don't see the Liberal Party doing the same anymore, and it's absolutely disgraceful. Let us all band together, highlight this issue, and demand that the candidates at the forthcoming federal election tell us exactly what their stance is on these issues, and let's get the best deal, and let us never, ever stand away from acting, walking the walk about how precious this area is, and it should be defended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Further speakers? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't think I can be as eloquent as Councillor Miles, but I just wanted to add my support for the minute. And in saying that, I think the huge issue around the airport really is those environmental, social and health implications that it will deliver to the people of Western Sydney and the Blue Mountains. And equally concerning is the absence of the flight paths. And I think at the heart of that is that absolute disregard for community consultation that we've seen throughout this entire process with the airport. The community hasn't been brought along in this, and we continue to be kept in the dark. And it's going to have implications for the way we live our lives, for the environment. And as Councillor Miles and Councillor Hollywood have already said, for the way we live, for the quality of life that we have here. So I fully support this minute.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fisher. Further councillors, Councillor Redshaw has the call.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I'd like to reaffirm a lot of what's been said, and I'd further like to say that this government has not only a disregard for community consultation, but a disregard for community in general, and particularly the large population areas of Western Sydney, from Campbelltown right through to Windsor. And, you know, the health implications are quite significant given the size of the population in that area and the tendency for Sydney's pollution to gather in the Nepean area. But also the environmental impact for the Blue Mountains is, we're in a climate emergency. And for the government to be contemplating a new airport in this sort of area, I mean, they don't want to stop at an airport, but I won't start on some of the other initiatives that this government wants to destroy the Blue Mountains with. But I think we need to continually fight and speak strongly against these sorts of initiatives that are against the interests of a large number of communities, of large populations of people and large areas of the environment. The implications are huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Redshaw. Further councillors wish to speak? There being none, I'll put the matter to the vote. Anyone else wish to speak? Otherwise we'll vote on it. Councillor Sage has the call.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'd like to acknowledge the somewhat cynical and conspiratorial viewpoints put by some councillors, So let me start by saying that the Nancy Bird Walton Airport at Badgerys Creek has bipartisan support for a 24-hour airport, so that no matter that the Blue Mountains Labor and the federal Labor candidate agitates, it will be done with the blessing of the Labor leader. It is a federal government project. Your objections have been previously noted, so reaffirming this misplaced objection is, I think, a total waste of time, of resources, of ratepayers' money, and a futile exercise. The tens of thousands of dollars already spent fighting an airport that was always going to be built by both major parties was an exercise in political vanity. The money could have better been spent in fixing flooding and draining issues in the Blue Mountains, such as at York Street in Glenbrook, as per the notices at the end of the motion, the notices of motion at the end of the council business agenda. I believe that the CEO has a delegate who attends the forum on Western Sydney Airport who would have reported back on where the flight path development was up to. Maybe that person should be reporting back to council after the meetings, although I do note that the meeting minutes are publicly available on the FOWSA website. So the proof of concept flight paths was completed in 2015, as you did say, Mr. Mayor, and significant changes were made after community consultation. Preliminary design phase is currently underway, and the preliminary airspace design will be open for public exhibition in mid-2023. Feedback from the community and industry will be considered before a final airspace and flight path is settled. It's not hard to find that information. Informed community decision making would be helped if council allowed information to be disseminated through its own channels to provide a balanced view. But council is so bent on opposing something that is already happening, it refuses to provide that information on its own channels, so that an informed debate is impossible in the Blue Mountains. I would also note the council has received $18.7 million from the Western Parkland City Livability Program, which is part of the Western Sydney City Deal, majority funded through federal and state governments, 20% by council contribution, and that integral to the Western Parkland City, which includes the Blue Mountains, is the Western Sydney Airport. Ratepayers expect council to address those matters that it has control of, such as the potholes in local roads, the drainage problems throughout the mountains, which have been exacerbated during this wet weather. So let's get back to basics instead of paddling in areas council has no direct control. Let's get back to servicing the people of the Blue Mountains with the things that they really want and need.
Before I speak in reply, do any other councillors wish to speak? Then I'll exercise my right of reply. Councillor Sage's speech was interesting, but unfortunately lacking a few things, including the truth. No ratepayers' money is being spent on this resolution at all. We are simply debating a policy position. So it is wrong to suggest that areas like York Street, Glenbrook would somehow get funding for their curbing and guttering and other issues if we hadn't moved this motion tonight. It costs us zero to express a view and write a letter. On the last term of council, absolutely $0 and 0 cents was spent on this issue. We simply took a policy position. So let me be clear, any impression you were just given that this resolution somehow costs ratepayers' money is false and misleading. It's wrong. Absolutely wrong to suggest that council expressing a position on an issue like this will cost ratepayers' money. Absolutely none. In relation to the so-called community consultation and changes made after the, draft flight paths were put out in 2015, well, where are they? Where are the changes? If changes were made, show us the changes. We don't get to see them until 2023, conveniently after a local government, a federal government, and a state government election. So if these changes were made, where are they? They're invisible. They're in witness protection. And I'll suggest to you it's because the community is not going to like them. And that's why we don't get to see them. In terms of the livability of projects and the city deal, let's again go to the truth. Council's opposition to the airport was written into the city deal. It was acknowledged that our council opposed the airport. So that funding was not linked to any support for the airport. It specifically, in terms, wasn't. So that proposition that was just put to the chamber is also untrue. Now, I don't care if both sides of politics federally support this. I'll oppose my own party as well as the current government if I have to. This is bad for the Blue Mountains. If the city gets a curfew and we don't, that's also wrong. That says that out here we are second-class citizens, and I don't care who proposes it. You do something that hurts the Blue Mountains and I will oppose you, because as mayor and the councillors here present, we're elected to represent the Blue Mountains, and without fear or favour, any political party that proposes something that hurts the Blue Mountains will meet my opposition, and I suspect tonight the majority of councillors here. No flight paths until 2.5 years out from the airport coming into operation is insane. It will be too late to change anything by then. A curfew for the residents of Sydney, but not for the residents of Western Sydney, tells us we are second class. Impacts to flora and fauna demonstrated in reports issued to the government, ignored. Acknowledged health effects in Western Sydney, ignored. Whether you're for or against the airport, there's one thing that should unite us all. Two things actually, that our community deserves a curfew, and that our community deserves to know before 2.5 years out of operations where the planes will fly. I'm opposed to the airport, but these two latter concepts should unite all fair-thinking people. And I think that it's important that our community is treated with the same dignity and respect as other parts of Sydney. Thank you, councillors. One matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Councillors, I'll call them. Councillors Miles, Hollywood, Redshaw, Greenhill, Van Opdorp, Hua, West, Fisher, Fell, and did I say Van Opdorp? Yes, I did. Against, councillors Christie and Sage. Did I miss anybody? I declare the motion carried. All right, item mayoral minute number 2, opposition to raising Warragamba Dam wall. It's moved me, seconded the Deputy Mayor. Councillors, this is a totemic issue as well as an existential threat to the Blue Mountains. The raising of Warragamba Dam wall will do very little about flooding downstream, but what it will do is enable more development of the floodplain. If government is really concerned about development in the floodplain, spend the money resuming the houses that shouldn't have been built there, instead of spending billions on raising a dam wall that will not increase our water supply, because they specifically say it'll be allowed to ebb away, but will flood vast areas of a World Heritage area. Now, you will be able to see it at High Point from places like Echo Point. Sacred areas like Kadumba will be flooded. Every single cultural heritage site in the Burragarang destroyed. Flora and fauna, over 100 species wiped out. That is a reality. And when you consider that most of the flooding occurs downstream of Warragamba Dam, it's not going to do much for those areas impacted now. UNESCO has already expressed concern about this. The World Heritage listing of the Blue Mountains is at risk. There are those out there parading with koalas I notice in photo shoots where koalas don't live, but never mind, saying how much they care about koalas. Well, this pristine koala habitat in the Blue Mountains, one of the clearest and cleanest koala habitats in Australia, will be partially flooded by this proposition. It's hypocrisy to support that view and then claim that you somehow care about those species. The simple fact is, to enable more development on the floodplain, the state government proposes to flood a World Heritage area. That's offensive. That's obscene. That's unprecedented. There are 2 cities in the world surrounded by World Heritage Area, Banff and the Blue Mountains. And this state government plans to flood one of them so that they can develop the floodplain. I said before, this issue is omnipresent. That's the flooding, existential. It exists and will happen if the dam wall goes up. But I also said it is totemic. And what did I mean by that? Well, it's totemic of the insane and slavish desire of this government to overdevelop Sydney at any cost, even at the cost of a World Heritage Area. Now, there is a clear issue here for the people of the city of Blue Mountains. If you love the bush, if you love the wildlife, if you care about the environment and the habitat, if that's why you moved here, or if it's why you stay here, if it's why you put up with the longer commutes and the distance from Sydney, the sparser population, if it's why you want those things or why you endure those things, the beautiful environment is why you live with those things, then you should be offended by a government that's prepared to wreak such destruction upon it as to bring UNESCO into the conversation. I'll end this by focusing on something that I think is incredibly important, and that's the cultural heritage aspects. To see all of the cultural heritage areas of the Burragorang destroyed by this proposition is unthinkable. For Gundungurra people, it's akin to flooding the Sistine Chapel. It is unthinkable. And the way Gundungurra and traditional owners have been treated by the government in this process is appalling. So this council should reaffirm its opposition, join with our neighbouring friends to the south, and fight against the destruction of this beautiful World Heritage Area that surrounds us. The Deputy Mayor has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll keep this short because I know we've got a lot to get through tonight. Look, I wanted to highlight that this is an existential issue for the Blue Mountains. We are a city in a World Heritage Area. Many of us ran very explicitly on a campaign for our own elections opposing the Warragamba Dam wall. I think it is really important for us to know as a community who around the table supports this position and who doesn't. We got no insight again when these questions were posed by the Blue Mountains Conservation Society. Some people didn't fill it in. I also want to just very basically, I absolutely agree with all of the points made in relation to the cultural heritage, the importance of our World Heritage listing for the Blue Mountains and our Blue Mountains tourist economy. But I did want to highlight that whilst certain members of the federal government appear to be very concerned about koalas, maybe they should actually think about some of the other flora that will be and fauna that will be put at risk. And I particularly want to highlight the Regent honeyeater, 400 left in the wild, critically endangered species whose habitat and nesting area is exactly where the flooding will occur. And I have this picture behind me because you probably can't see it, but behind me is exactly between Mount Solitary and the view down into the Kadumba Valley. That is where the Regent honeyeater nests. That is what's going to be flooded. It's absolutely appalling. So I absolutely agree with protecting koalas, but let's have the federal government and the state government stand up for protecting all forms of cultural heritage in a city in a World Heritage Area and our beautiful Blue Mountains.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Redshaw, then Councillor Van Opdorp, and then Councillor Hua. Councillor Redshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. and thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to just reiterate how much destruction we've already brought to this country. In 200 years, the destruction of species, habitat, environment in general, and particularly of Aboriginal heritage has been enormous. We can't keep doing it. We can't continually increase what we take from the environment. It's just ridiculous. And the billions of dollars that would be spent on raising the Warragamba Dam wall for minimal impact, it wouldn't supply more water, as some people might think, and it won't help. It's not a good idea to build on floodplains because they're floodplains anyway, and that doesn't get changed by increasing the height of the dam wall. In fact, it's a very dangerous thing to take on. So I would like to very much support this declaration.
Thank you so much, Councillor Redshaw. Councillor Van Opdorp and then Councillor Hua. I think you're on mute, Councillor Van Opdorp. We can see you speaking, but hear you not.
Thank you, Mayor. Like many of us this evening, we were elected on a platform which opposes the raising of the dam wall. Today, again, I received emails from people in the community urging council, urging myself to maintain this stance, outlining very articulately the reasons why this proposal won't increase safety. In fact, will put more people at risk. In speaking tonight, I'm thinking of Auntie Sharon Halls and the Gundungurra people who stand to lose a lot of their cultural heritage. If this proposal goes ahead, they've already lost so much, and I believe it's up to us to help them protect what's left. I think this proposal is unnecessary. It's very expensive, which will starve other public programs of funding, for instance, our hospitals and schools. And also, I think it's unsafe and gives people an illusion of increasing safety when in fact it will not increase safety and will put more people at risk if there is an inundation. And I think what's happened in the Blue Mountains overnight with the flooding in lots of areas and also this persistent rain that we've had over the last 8 weeks, to me, that is another reason for why we should oppose this, because all of that rain goes somewhere and it all heads downhill, increasing the amount of damage to the cultural heritage and our own World Heritage status.
Thank you so much, Councillor Van Opdorp. And Councillor Hua is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I just wish to add my support to this motion and to reiterate and reinforce the points already made by previous speakers. Look, really, most of the points against this ridiculous and expensive and culturally devastating and offensive proposal have already been made. But I just wish to implore the state government and implore those sitting around this table who may have a closed mind on this issue to listen to our scientists. Just last night, we saw one of Australia's most reputable environmental scientists, Professor Jamie Pittock, on the Four Corners show on the terrible argument splitting our community in two around the Brumbies in the Kosciuszko National Park region and the Stone Mountains more broadly. Professor Pittock has been someone who's been known to me for well over 25 years, is at the pinnacle of his profession as a professor at the Finnis School of Environmental Science at ANU in Canberra. He is absolutely one of the most reputable and respected voices in this field that the world has. And I think we ignore at our collective peril very strong and solid assessments that he has made over many years of research, which are very neatly summarised in an opinion piece published on March the 21st, 2021 that I am quite fond of referring to in debates on social media. And I'll quote it here now. Well, first of all, I think probably the even larger point that he makes is that this is just a dangerous building this dam to try and make the idea of living on the floodplain more tolerable is a trap. It's absolutely ridiculous. We are never going to stop the floods. They are inevitable, and giving people any false sense of security that life on the floodplain is somehow safer is really just encouraging mice into the trap. It is proceeding this proposal is a dangerous distraction from the much more pressing and urgent measures required to build evacuation routes to enable those already living on the floodplain to get out of there in a hurry when they have to, often with very little notice. And I'll just quote from, to finish off, I'll just quote from Professor Pittock's opinion piece where he says, there are no cheap or simple solutions to reducing the risk to life and property from floods in the Hawkesbury and Nepean Valley. Dangerous floods are inevitable. The safest option is to keep people off the floodplain, out of harm's way. And that's the point that we must continue to press the government to listen to. And if this one won't, hopefully the next one will.
Eloquently put. We heard all of it, although you did sound like Davros, and the intake of breath was especially affecting, but all of your words were understandable. Thank you very much, Councillor Hua. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Fisher has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to reiterate support for what has been said so far. And as has been mentioned, the cost to the Blue Mountains and the World Heritage status is enormous. And I'd just like to add to that, the cost to the Indigenous community of this raising of the dam wall is actually immeasurable. Once those artefacts are gone, they're gone. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Any other councillors wish to speak? There being no further, it has not been spoken against as one matter before us. I will.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Councillor Miles, do you wish to speak?
Yes, please.
Indeed, the call is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's important to understand.
Well, it's my pleasure, Councillor Miles.
Well, you're very kind, sir. It's important to understand for all of us that this proposition does not lead to increased drinking water for Sydney. And I think there's a view that's been allowed to proceed abroad that raising the dam wall somehow insulates Sydney's drinking water supply, given its constant expansion of the city, which is pushing into the Blue Mountains, as we discussed in the last issue, and as we discussed when we talk about low-rise housing codes and so on, that the state government is pushing towards us. Now, this doesn't give more drinking water, and nor necessarily does it give more protection for people in the Hawkesbury Nepean. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about that. The only parts of rain that falls on the Blue Mountains that goes into the dam is that falls between Medlow Bath and Tablelands Road, Wentworth Falls on the southern side. Everything else, every other drop of rain goes into the Nepean River below the dam and is not caught. So you could raise the dam wall as high as you like, but it will not prevent a flood, because all of those sources, from the creeks around Glenbrook, the ones that run off the ridge that Hawkesbury Road is built on, the Grace River, of course, and so on. We haven't even got to other, like the Lower Macdonald River, that feed into the Hawkesbury River and contribute to a flood. That's only one of many issues about what can cause a flood. The Hawkesbury is tidal as far up as Windsor, and it's quite tidal the lower down you go. In the effect of a king tide, it's a large body of water pushing back up the river, preventing the flow of excess water down away, and as causing a problem for safety. The water remains in the valley when we don't want it to. Then there's the Sackville Gorges. These too hold up the flow of water out of the danger zone. This is what the SES refers to as the bathtub effect. So we have a large amount of rain, a large amount of water flowing off the Blue Mountains into the Hawkesbury River, well below the dam, and that has no effect on it. So raising the dam wall for flood safety, not necessarily, and probably not in my view. I'll just say in my view. There's one other thing that nobody knows anything about. Nobody knows at any given time about the effect of one other factor, and that is sandbanks within the Hawkesbury River. And I know quite a bit about it, because in the late 70s and early 80s, my father, a surveyor, worked on the Hawkesbury River. And so I was intimately involved with hydrological surveys and graphs and all of these very interesting things that tell us that sandbanks come and they go. The survey branch of the New South Wales Department of Public Works didn't know where they were at any one time because they come and they go, but it needed to understand what the activity, what the behaviour of those sandbankings were, because that is another thing that holds back the flow of water, and it can't be predicted because the Great Dividing Range is largely sandstone. And so the sand washes off into the river. Here come the sandbanks. Here comes a lot of rain, and nobody can really be sure. But the survey branch and the Department of Public Works wanted to model what the behaviour was as a way of informing the other levels of government of the likelihood of flooding and the danger of. So really, we can raise the dam wall as much as we want. It's not going to make the difference. And yet the government would have us believe this. I think that it's much more about large amounts of development in the area that is on the floodplain. And possibly, I understand it's been difficult for some people in those areas to get home insurance because of the impossibility of predicting floods and the catastrophic danger when they do occur. And we saw that not that very long ago. So this is what it's all about to me. And as of course has been mentioned by many speakers, there's significant cultural issues, significant environmental issues with raising the dam wall. But above all, you've got this con that says if you raise the dam wall, you're either going to have more drinking water, not true. You're going to have safety from flooding, not true under most circumstances. For example, in the 1978 flood, which I happened to live through, living in Wilberforce at the time, at quite a young age, the dam got full and water had to be released while there was still a significant amount of water in the Hawkesbury Nepean system. And that is a possibility, that if the water is still there and the slow release system, which is proposed, starts to release water, it will actually contribute to a flood, not save us from one. It's not right. It's a silly idea. And let's call it out for what it is, a fig leaf for overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. And on time, and I apologise for not warning you, any other councillors wish to speak? There being none. There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour of the Merrill Minute? Councillors Hoare, Redshaw, Van Opdorp, Greenhill, West, Fell, Miles, Hollywood and Fisher. Against? Councillors Sage and Christie. Did I miss anyone out? I'll declare it carried. Thank you. BMCC declaration of a climate emergency. It's moved me, second to the Deputy Mayor. Councillors, we declared a climate emergency very early on of local governments. Councillor Hoare, I acknowledge your position in that debate. I hope you can hear me. I know you're undergoing some technological repairs there, but I acknowledge the stance you took. We are in the midst of a climate emergency, and I thank the Deputy Mayor for seconding this resolution so the council can reaffirm that proposition. In just a few short years, we've seen the city surrounded on three sides by bushfires following a drought the likes of which we'd not seen in living memory. We saw an intensity of fire so great that it actually burnt in the opposite direction, in some cases, to how it would normally burn. And the Lithgow fire and its junction with the Blue Mountains was an example of that. We saw fire behaviour the likes of which experienced firefighters had never seen before. We saw fire running against the wind. We saw 70% of our World Heritage Area impacted by bushfire. And immediately the fires ended, came the rains. But they came with an intensity that, again, hadn't been seen in living memory. The millions of dollars of damage across the city is still being repaired, and we've recently commenced work thanks to a grant on the Charles Darwin Walk. Millions of dollars being spent across the city. In the 2 summers since the fires, both have been La Nina summers, back to back, with a level of water on the ground not seen again in living memory. The Blue Mountains sits atop a sponge, all of those hanging swamps below it. There is so much water in those hanging swamps as they draw water downwards, and we see it come up in springs like the Glenbrook Lagoon, like Wentworth Falls Lake and other places. But there is so much water in those sponges, those living sponges, those hanging swamps, that it's actually coming back up out of the ground. Infrastructure built decades ago was never designed to cope with the amount of water that is on the ground and coming out of the sky and impacting the Blue Mountains right now. We're seeing flooding events across the city, the likes of which we've not seen before. There are millions of dollars worth of landslides to repair. There is a, as they call it in the corporate speak, a burning platform for this council. And that is, and there are a number, and that is that this city strung along a ridgeline feels the effects of climate change most profoundly and early. And this city has a task ahead of it to retool, re-gear and reconstruct in a way that can actually cope with weather events, the likes of which we've not experienced. Last night, Councillor Van Opdorp and I were on the phone together as water swirled into a culvert and absolutely wiped away half a road in just seconds. The images she took, which I passed on to our local Blue Mountains Gazette, are there for you all to see. Last night, I stood with our Director, Infrastructure Economy, with our staff in the dark as they, having been ravaged by COVID-19 and all of the rain events they've experienced this summer, turned out yet again to try to hold together infrastructure not designed for the kind of rain we're seeing. Climate change is here. It's right now. We are experiencing it. It is an emergency. It's a burning platform for this city, and we have to address it. So this council should recommit to the view that we are in the middle of a climate emergency, declare that it's so, and continue our work. Tonight, I will put before you a proposition that a Merrill reference group is formed to talk about these issues and to assist staff in guiding our way forward. You know, I've asked Councillor Hoare to chair that. Climate change is here. The emergency is real, and we should declare it. Does the Deputy Mayor wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I'll reserve my right.
Yes, thank you. It's a long night. Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor West has the call.
Hi, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that when this council first declared a climate emergency, I was so proud. I now sit here again. I sit here now as a councillor, and I'm again proud. Would that every organisation has as much initiative as this council does. Every reasonable person knows that the world is warming. The effects are obvious and extreme, as we saw last night. I really think that a lot of young people feel really strongly about this issue, as we've seen with the school strikes for climate change. I know that I myself really worry about this issue because not just for myself, but people younger than me that will be alive in 2050, as well, I hope I will be too, but it's just, it's ridiculous that it's up to councils to take this initiative, because it really should be happening at a higher level. I just wanted to applaud this motion because I know that it's so important. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor West. Thank you very much. And we're so pleased that you're here to be part of this. Councillor Hoare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm sure my views on this matter are fairly well known, so I won't carry on at great length, but I just wish to express my very strong support for the motion and my gratitude, Mr. Mayor, for your bringing it forward so early in the council term. I think it's very important that we as the Blue Mountain City Council and the second equal council to declare a climate emergency shortly after the Upper Hunter Council, that we do reaffirm our commitment. I note with some regret, if even alarm, that just a few days ago, the Port Macquarie Hastings Council, after a bit of a changing of the guard on that particular council, voted to rescind its climate emergency, which I think is an absolutely foolish and so let's just say greatly unwise thing to do in the face of all of the science that keeps coming at us harder and faster. I urge everyone around this table to keep an eye out for the imminent release on February the 28th of the sixth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's Working Group 2, which will update the world on the science of the latest insights into the science on climate change, which I think will should convince anyone whose ears are open to scientific understanding, logic, and we're just plain common sense. That the evidence now is absolutely irrefutable and overwhelming that humans are impacting on the climate change, on the climate system in a way that is causing rapid and unpredictable rates of climatic shifts. And we're seeing the evidence of that every summer in the Northern Hemisphere. We're seeing the impacts of the La Nina, one of the worst La Nina seasons we've ever experienced in this country. But you can bet your boots that we are going to be back into the El Nino phase of the ENSO oscillation, the El Nino Southern Oscillation phase, and we'll be fighting further catastrophic bushfires. I hope to be doing so on the front lines as a political representative that does hold a hose. I hope that by the time the next bushfires hit our city, that I'll have received my certification as a crew leader with my local brigade to be able to put my shoulder to the wheel of helping our community to adapt to the climate change that is absolutely, without doubt, already locked into the climate system. But it's all the more imperative that in the absolute vacuum left by our federal leaders in the climate change space, that local government steps up arm in arm under the umbrella of the Cities Power Partnership with our colleagues across the country and across the world to put out the message to our communities, to our voters, that we have not got any time to waste. We must take urgent steps to address the climate emergency if our children and our grandchildren are to have any hope at all of enjoying the relatively stable climate that we've been privileged to spend our lives growing up in. There could not be a more serious matter before our council tonight. I think it's very important that we set a very clear direction for this council and that we redouble our efforts
1 minute
in a practical sense to ensure that we are walking the talk. This council has done an absolutely outstanding job of providing the leadership, and we've received recognition for that leadership, as you well know, Mr. Mayor. And I think it's all the more important that we re-emphasise to our community what a great deal of trouble we are and what are already in, and how that will only get worse in the absence of swift and far-reaching measures to reduce our climate emissions. Thank you. I went on for longer than I thought, but I understand the passion that I feel for this issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hoare. Do any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Miles and then Councillor Redshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just briefly reiterate my stance, which I took 2 years ago when this issue was brought up, which is to oppose it, and I'll be opposing it again tonight. I'm not convinced that humans have contributed to the changing climate. I think the debate will be ongoing and forever. The reason I say that is that since the dinosaurs went extinct, there have been no less than 15 ice ages come and gone. That's rather significant climate change. Is it the cycle of this planet? I'm not sure we'll ever know, because when we look back at these events, it's often hard to pinpoint the causes. Should we work together to reduce pollution? Of course. And this council's got a great track record on doing that, and I've been very proud to support those initiatives going back 15, 20 years. But I want to make a specific comment and challenge some of the beliefs that are held. If you're going to talk about climate change, then why are we not talking about the growth in the population of Sydney, the growth of hard surface, of the huge disparity between new suburbs with no trees as opposed to the old leafy suburbs that we know in the North Shore and so on? Why are so much of the new housing that is built in this state at this time built in an environmentally irresponsible way. So we talk about doing something, but yet here we see in front of us a challenge which isn't met. So a declaration is one thing, fine, if you want to make it, I don't agree, but okay, that's good. Let's have a debate about these things. The other thing that focuses my mind is the human cost, not of this motion, and I recognise the good intent of everybody who has put forward ideas or will do so. But in trying to cut down on the coal industry, there's two particular areas, the Hunter Valley and Central Queensland, which could experience a very severe loss of jobs. And it's extremely difficult to create jobs in rural Australia. And if the government, any level of government, thinks they can do it, I think they should think again. It really will require years and years of consistent effort, consistent funding. So I don't want to see all of these declarations leaving people behind, but that's exactly what we do see happening. And people are right to be concerned. And I notice there's an alliance formed of everybody on every side of the debate in the Hunter Valley around recognising that whether you agree with climate change or not, think humans have contributed or not, the loss of jobs is going to have a catastrophic effect on those communities, and it will. So I'll leave it at that, Mr Mayor. I know we've got a long night, but I'll keep my position as it was previously. Thank you.
We do, councillors, and no one should feel the need to speak to the clock. We have a long night ahead, a very big business paper. Councillor Redshaw, who's a model in this regard, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to point out a recent study, and it is important that we do take note of the science in this, and there has been consistent and considerable scientific study of our climate and the human impact on it. The massive increase in greenhouse gases that occurred with industrialisation is very well known and very obvious. A recent study has pointed to, has shown quite definitively that our fire risk has increased substantially since British colonisation. In the last 200 years, the land clearing, the destruction of environment has brought about the scale of fires that we see. Indigenous management previous to that meant that the landscape, the intensity of fires was never like it is now. So there is no doubt, and science has clearly established that there is a human impact on climate. Some people won't believe that we can actually fish out the seas, and we have the capacity to do that. We have the capacity to deplete the fish that we eat out of the oceans. I mean, it might be hard to believe, but we can do that. And we continue to want to keep this up. I mean, that is just not feasible. We can't keep it up. The jobs, well, there are jobs in other areas. There are going to be jobs in renewables. There are going to be all sorts of jobs. So it is not going to create a catastrophe to lose jobs in coal. There will be replacement industries. There's going to be all sorts of new industries in our new economy, which is not based on what you dig up out of the ground and burn. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Redshaw. Eloquently put in just 2 minutes. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Fell.
Thank you, and I'll try to be even shorter than the 2-minute record that's now been set.
The challenge is out there.
It is indeed. I think that the issue in its generalities has been very well canvassed, and so I'm not going to go over any of that about the facts of climate change and so on. I will acknowledge Councillor Miles's point of view and acknowledge that I regard it as being sincerely held and not unthinkingly held whatsoever. I would point out that what we're doing with this motion is asking the federal government to increase their commitment. And I would say that one of the reasons we're doing it, it's clear to me that chairing the Planetary Health Committee, that we have a large number of eminent local people and interstate people, and we have contact with some international experts, and they see the Blue Mountains as an appropriate place to have a body like this, partly because we are so vulnerable. And I would just ask people to take that on board, that there was a point that you made, Mr Mayor, about it, that we are on a ridge. We are very susceptible to deep, very quick effects of climate change. And I would just say that with this, we're saying we're doing our bit as much as we can. We're going further and further all the time. There are motions tonight that will take us further. And all we're doing is saying we can't do it alone. We really do have to have this issue, this major existential threat, addressed by all levels of government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallon. You did in fact do it. Councillor Hoare applauds you. Thank you very much. I was the first person to say existential tonight, by the way. Any other councillors wish to speak? There being no further, it's not been spoken against. I'll put it, all those in favour. Councillors Fell, Redshaw, Van Opdorp, Greenhill, West, Hoare, Hollywood, Fisher. Against? Councillors Sage, Miles and Christie. I declare it carried. Thank you, councillors. The next item is moved by me and seconded, actually, in this instance, by Councillor Van Opdorp, and it relates to Clairvaux. People may not realise this, but the Department of Communities and Justice intends to actually bring to an end the lease of 3 community-based non-government organisations at Clairvaux Centre in Katoomba because of the cost of renovation. It is important, need to stand up for those 3 affected NGOs. They operate significant community support services to the Blue Mountains, and this includes the Blue Mountains Aboriginal Culture and Resource Centre, an occupant of Clairvaux for over 27 years. And now this organisation provides critical support services to the First Nations community, covering early childhood, covering youth and elders. We also have in there the Wild Plant Rescue Group. And now this is a community-based native plant nursery, precious to our community, and the Lura Day Options is also sitting within Clairvaux, an important NGO. This is a disability support service provided by Greystanes Disability Services. I propose to write to the Department of Communities and Justice through our state member, Trish Doyle, and also to the Shadow Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, strongly pushing the notion that the Department of Communities and Justice needs to invest in the renovations required to allow those important NGOs to continue to operate out of the Clairvaux Centre and to provide the critical support services they provide to the Blue Mountains. When I heard about this, I was horrified, and that's why I bring it to you tonight. I have nothing further to say, and I'll ask the seconder, Councillor Van Opdorp, if she wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I've had a long association with the Clairvaux complex. In the 1980s, myself and another local woman, Jeannie Edgar, started a non-government organisation, which was a child protection service based in the Gunnedah Cottage. At that time, the Clairvaux Children's Home was still operating. I think originally the resource of the Clairvaux Centre was handed over to the community, in part due to a desire to reconcile its past. So the Clairvaux home was, similar to a lot of those homes. They had a lot of Aboriginal children in them. Some of our local Indigenous people who are now in their 50s were children in that facility. So it seemed only right that organisations like the Aboriginal Culture and Resource Centre, the Gundungurra Tribal Council should be located there. We also have the Gateway Child and Family Service located there, as well as Wild Plant Rescue and Greystanes. So it is a really important facility. Today I reached out to the Aboriginal Culture and Resource Centre and also to Wild Plant Rescue and the Gundungurra Tribal Council. Those groups are feeling very anxious about their future. As anyone would know that's lived and worked in the mountains, there's a real scarcity of affordable office space for community organisations. A lot of those old community organisations like ACRC were never funded with a contribution for rental, and we're always going to be reliant on local government or other organisations to provide free or cheap accommodation, and this is where Clairvaux has been a great facility. It's beautifully located. Culturally, I think it's wonderful. I've been to a lot of wonderful cultural events there for Sorry Day, for NAIDOC Day. But, these groups are really going to struggle if they're put out to the open market to look for some accommodation. Some of them won't survive, like Wild Plant Rescue is not a funded organisation. They're solely reliant on selling their stock. They have a lot of volunteers. It's quite likely that they will struggle to survive if they have to vacate that premises. The Aboriginal Culture and Resource Centre has, for the last probably 15 years, been looking for an alternative premise that took them closer to town, because that location is also a little bit hard for Aboriginal people to get to, who are often socio-economically disadvantaged, may not have cars, and also it has that memory of operating as a children's home, which removed Aboriginal children from their families. So it's a little bit of a mixed blessing in a way, but they don't know how they're going to survive if they have to relocate. It's pretty clear that facility is worth a lot of money. Our state government, the Liberal state government, has gone about selling lots of publicly owned assets. And I can imagine this would be very tempting. It's a very large site, absolutely beautiful site. It'd be very tempting to sell this off, and I'm not sure what purposes it could be used for, but I'm sure that's part of the motivation. So I congratulate the Mayor on this motion, and I think it's very important for our local community sector.
Can I also acknowledge the Gunnegarra Tribal Council and their connection to this site, and say to them, I include them in the comments that both I and, of course, Councillor Van Opdal, in her acknowledgement, made tonight. Councillors, to move the meeting along, can I ask that only councillors speak to this item who are opposed to it? I think, if you want to get in the paper, put out a media release on it, we might just try and move the meeting on a bit. Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay, Councillor Hoare. Now, only if you're speaking against the motion.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just feel so strongly about this issue. I want to put it on the record my thanks to you and Councillor Van Opdal for bringing it forward, and to publicly accuse the state government of demolition by neglect. It is an absolute outrage that having neglected these facilities for years, the state government turns around and suddenly says, oh dear, it's a bit too expensive to keep them going. Out you go, community. This must be opposed with every breath in our bodies, and used to reveal the state government for the, insert your Florida adjectives here. It makes me so angry. This is a battle we must fight and work together to win. Thank you.
Here. Thank you, Councillor Hoare. Now, obviously, no one's against this, but I am going to invite the other Ward 1 councillor who's present, if you wanted to put your position on the record, Councillor Redshaw, Alternate Deputy Mayor. I'll invite you to do so now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I'm very disappointed to see this occurring. I actually worked at Clairvaux in the late 70s as a youth worker, and it was very sad and devastating to see children living in those conditions. But to come to now, yes, it's opportunistic of the government to see this site as something to sell, and to not value how important community resources like this are. That they have a value way beyond the dollar value of the site. And thank you, Councillor Van Opdal, for your background on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I gather no one else wishes to speak in this debate. No, one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? I thank you. I declare it carried unanimously. And councillors, I know that the occupants of Clairvaux will thank you for your unanimous support. Mayoral Minute number 5, moved by me, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. You can see here that I wish to establish a mayoral reference group of family and domestic violence, that I wish to appoint Councillor Van Opdal, given her enormous experience in this field, to chair that committee, and I want to tell you why. Councillors, on average in Australia, as we know, a woman every week is killed by her current or former partner, someone who once professed love for her. 1 in 3 Australian women have experienced physical violence since the age of 15. 1 in 5 Australian women has experienced sexual violence. On average in Australia, police attend a family violence incident every 6 minutes. And 1 in 3 incidents of family violence in Australia have children present. We know that Aboriginal women are 33 times more likely to be hospitalised by family violence than the rest of the community. Women with a disability are 40% more likely to experience family violence. 1 in 7 Australian people over the age of 65 are likely to experience elder abuse. 1 in 4 Australian children are likely to experience physical or sexual abuse. Within the Blue Mountains, within this city in which we are living and representing, there are 200 to 300 reports to police of family or domestic violence every year. When Councillor Van Opdorp was elected, I saw an opportunity to bring a person who has had experience in this field since she was about 18 years of age, if I recall her history properly. And she's a tiny bit older than that now. And I can say, I think she won't be offended, over 40 years experience. To chair a committee that looks at how this council can help. And when she joined this council, I decided to harness her experience and to call it to action and to give her a responsibility based on her enormous knowledge of this area to help advise us about what we can do as a local government to support the campaign against this epidemic in our community. The hour grows late, and I think if this is unanimously supported, we should probably just unanimously support it without saying too much. I want to thank Councillor Van Opdorp for agreeing to take on this role. I did ask her first. And I want to thank the Deputy Mayor who brought gender equality to the fore during the last term of council for supporting me in this initiative and putting her hand up for it already tonight. Councillors, unless there's any burning desire to speak to the matter or oppose it, I do note that Councillor Van Opdorp wants to say a couple of things, but I would urge us to move the night along. But Councillor Van Opdorp, I'll just see if the seconder wishes to speak or if she's content to reserve. She's not moving, so I'll take it that Deputy Mayor Hollywood's content to reserve. She nods, and I'll invite Councillor Van Opdorp to say something.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for having confidence in me and asking me to be your representative on that reference group. It's been a really great thing for local community services in the Blue Mountains to be able to have this close working relationship with council. We've been doing this for over 3 mayoral not terms, but through 3 different mayors. First there was Adam Searle, then Daniel Miles, and now yourself. So I want to acknowledge the previous mayors as well, because I think council's been great in terms of really developing a solid relationship. I guess we need to acknowledge the gender equity strategy and the work that Romola has done on that, because sexism, gender discrimination and domestic violence are completely interlinked. But mostly I just want to say that I hope to be able to work well with local organisations, community groups, but also the police, health workers, the education people and communities and justice to progress the agenda to reduce and eliminate violence against women and children in the Blue Mountains. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Opdorp. Does anyone else wish to speak? There being none, I might put the matter. All those in favour? Against? I declare it carried unanimously, and I thank you all very much for your support. As we come to the end of mayoral minutes, mayoral minute number 6, standing in my name, is seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillors, we are doing work across the organisation in the space of climate change. It's work that actually saves the council money. The lower emissions lights that we're using save the council money. The solar panels we're placing on our buildings save the council money. The piloting of electrical vehicles will reduce emissions. We are on target to our net zero emissions by 2025, or at least we were last time we were briefed. And as the CEO is not looking nervous at me saying this now, I take it we're probably on target still. We are involved in the Cities Power Partnership, and although I won the Climate Ambassador Award last year, Councillor Hore, you piloted that. And so that's why I'm asking you to chair this mayoral reference group. There's a lot of background here. A lot of it's been debated already tonight. It is important that we bring the strings together of the actions we're taking to reduce emissions to net zero by 2025, of the actions we're taking to reduce our emissions and be more efficient. And whether you believe in climate change or not, that efficiency has a direct dividend to our ratepayers. The steps we're taking are actually saving money, which is going back into the organisation. Let's bring that string in with this one. In addition to that, our role in the Cities Power Partnership is nationwide. We need to bring all of those strings together under one banner. A report will come forward explaining to you all how. I want the chair in place now so that the chair can be involved in crafting that report, and that's why I'm nominating Councillor Hore. Does the Deputy Mayor wish to speak, or is she happy to reserve? Content to reserve. Does any councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hore, did you wish to say anything? Or are you happy to?
Look, in order to progress the night, I've spoken once on climate change tonight. There's much more I'd like to say about arguing with climate being similar to arguing with gravity, and invoking the names of my good mate, Dr. Michael, or Professor Michael Mann, and I'm sure he'll be very pleased to hear about our work here tonight. But look, I won't let the meeting drag on any further.
No. Thank you, Councillor Hore. Well, I thank you for accepting my invitation to chair this meeting. Any councillors opposed?
Thank you so much for extending it. It's a great honour.
My absolute pleasure. Any other councillors wish to speak in opposition to this matter? If no one wishes to speak in opposition, there's one matter before us. I'll put it. It's mayoral minute number 6, standing in my name. All those in favour? Councillors Hore, Redshaw, Van Opdorp, Greenhill, West, Hollywood, Miles, Fell, Fisher. Against? Councillors Christie and Sage. I declare it carried. Thank you. Mayoral matter of urgency, rural fire committees. Councillors, there's 2 rural fire committees. We need to appoint a chair. These resolutions are by me. Do that. The committees are now functioning and operating. I put before you my nominee for both committees, that being Councillor Miles, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any opposition? There being none, I put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Councillor Miles, 2 committees for you. Mayoral matter of urgency in relation to the cycling committee. The words are before you, councillors. They are extensive. I know that you will have read them. It's seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Let's get the mayoral reference group on cycling up and running. Councillors, you are all, I'm speaking to it and you've seconded it. Mm-hmm. You are all, as councillors, entitled to attend that committee, and I invite you to attend it. I don't wish to say anything further. Does the Deputy Mayor wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I was wondering if you would entertain consideration of somebody else to be considered to be appointed to the cycling committee, a community member.
Yep.
Her name is Libby Clark, and she is an advocate for women's cycling. And recognised within the cycling fraternity, I guess.
Libby Clark's name will go forward for consideration as part of this resolution, and you might get from Ms. Clark a CV, and we'll deal with that in due course. But there are a number of names before us, the nomination of the entire committee, and we'll include Ms. Clark in that. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this matter or oppose it, or shall we get the committee going? I hope to see plenty of councillors there. And Councillor Miles, this resolution puts you back in charge. So these 2 mayoral matters of urgency are the Miles matters. One matter before us, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Can I acknowledge one councillor has already come to me and expressed an interest in being active on this committee? It's Councillor Christie. Councillor Christie, as an avid cyclist myself, I thank you for your interest and activism, and I look forward to your participation. All right, councillors, now I'm going to go around the table and pull out items on which councillors wish to speak. I'm going to go to Councillor Fell, who's going to pull out a number of items, and they're going to be dealt with as an omnibus motion in one. And so I'll go to him now and I'll explain that proposition to you a little later. Councillor Fell, what items would you like to pull out?
Okay, the items which will go into the omnibus motion.
I'll just pull them all out and I'll deal with the omnibus motion. So all the items you wish to pull out.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 23,
yep,
34, 35.
Thank you, Councillor Fell. And councillors, please note, and I say this for the minutes, when you deal with item 13, which is my revenue task force, note you are dealing with it via the erratum. I want that minuted, please. Okay, I'm going to go around the room now. Councillor Redshaw, is there anything additional you want to pull out apart from those items numbered just now? And if you don't want to pull anything out, just shake your head. Thank you, you're content. Councillor Van Opdorp, are you content? You are content. Councillor West, are you content?
I'm content.
That's good to know that you are content. Councillor Miles, are you content? Are you very content? Councillor Hollywood, content, or do you wish to pull something out? Content, because it's already pulled out?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher, are you content? Content, thank you. Councillor Sage, do you wish to pull anything out?
I'm fine, thank you.
You're content, and I thank you. Councillor Christie, do you wish to pull anything out? You're content as well. Have I missed anybody? No.
Just me, but I'm very content.
Councillor Hua, I'm sorry, I missed you.
That's right.
You're always at the forefront of my mind, but it's good to know you're content. Thank you. All right, councillors, I'm going to move now to items numbered 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, note the erratum, and 14. Councillor Fell is going to put forward an omnibus motion, which you all have in your email. And that motion is moved Councillor Fell and seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Fell's motion covers all the conversations he and I have had with you through the course of the last few weeks. As you all know, I've reached out to all parties and I think we've accommodated everybody's wishes in that omnibus motion. If, however, anybody falls off the cart in this omnibus motion, we can correct it at the next meeting. But what we've done is work to give everybody the spot they sought on the committees, even in some cases extending the membership of those committees, and this is captured in the omnibus motion of Councillor Fell. Before I go to debate, should there be any, Executive Officer, can I ask you, are you content that Councillor Fell's omnibus motion covers the issues and is in order?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it is in order and the motions will be included in the unconfirmed minutes on the council website.
Yes, thank you, Executive Officer. Councillors, you've seen the resolution. Does anyone wish to speak or have any questions? It should give you all the committees you wished to be on. No one's moving? And now look, councillors, I'm going to put this. Now, we've had some debates tonight on policy issues and we've disagreed, but already there's a great sense of unity on this council. This resolution gives us all a role to play in the governance of this city moving forward as one team. There's one matter before us, I'll put it, that is items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 erratum and 14 as one resolution. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. And for those new councillors, my congratulations on moving your first omnibus motion. All right, that takes us then to those items that have not been pulled out. The items that have not been pulled out, items 7, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 36. It's moved the Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Fell. Those be moved in globo. I put that. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried, I think unanimously. I see no opposition, so I'm going to call it unanimous. Other items that have been pulled out now, item number 23, moved Councillor Hollywood, seconded Councillor Van Opdorp, is a resolution that has been circulated. It is different to the resolution in the business paper. Councillor Hollywood has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As many people will know, in September 2021, I successfully moved to defer the report for a further briefing on this matter, and for it also to be considered by the new council. I also wanted the community to have an opportunity, and I acknowledge that was informal, but I still wanted our community to have an opportunity to know that this planning proposal to amend a provision within the zoning within our LEP was actually coming before the council. I think that this deferral was a fair and measured action for us to take as councillors and as elected representative of our community. I can confirm for the public record we did have a further briefing, and I can also confirm for the public record that community members are also much more aware of this proposal. And in fact, I'd like to acknowledge the many community members who spoke to me by phone, email, but more importantly on the campaign trail. Some of them I don't know their names, but they all expressed concerns about this change and what it might mean for our local environment plan. And in particular, because supporting and protecting our local environment plan was actually a key election platform for many of us, and what our local environment plan does for us as a community living in a city in a World Heritage Area, and how our local environment plan has been built up over many years through significant consultation with our community, but also significant input from the advice that we get. There are reports commissioned. So I want to pay tribute to all of that work that creates what we have, which is our not only our local strategic planning statement, but most importantly, our LEP and our development control plans. So taking that all into account and acknowledging the submissions that our some community members have made to us tonight, and there will be people who are listening in tonight, I want to acknowledge that I'm moving quite a different set of words, which is effectively that we do not proceed with this planning proposal at this point, based on the fact that we've considered the reports, we've considered the briefings from the council officers, we've taken it into, the lengthy reports, I've read them several times, and I wanted to, I don't know how to do this, Mr. Mayor, because we don't have the screens.
The councillors have seen the resolution, and you've aptly described it for the community.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So for the community, there are a number of points that I'm raising concerns about the impacts, including the hard surfaces and the intensification of development, the traffic issues, the stormwater, and that some of these issues really will have an impact on the local
40 seconds
residential area, residential amenity, but also our environment, and that the land is extremely bushfire prone as well. So I will just leave it there, and hope that the community can read the resolution when it goes up in the minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hollywood. Appreciate that. The second to Councillor Van Opdorp. Did you wish to speak?
No, I don't wish to speak.
Yes, thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? For the clarity of the community, what's before the council now is a proposition that doesn't advance the matter that's in the business paper. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Hua, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll just wish to speak briefly on this matter to concur with the points very eloquently made by my colleague, Councillor Hollywood. I do wish to acknowledge the enormous amount of work that has gone into putting up this planning proposal, but I must confess that I've discussed this at great length and given it very long and serious consideration. But ultimately, the sanctity of the LEP, I think, really needs to be upheld, and it worries me deeply the precedent that this might set and the encouragement it might provide for further attempts to create loopholes in our LEP. I do believe there are other sites much more suitable for the proposed use in the mountains, and that don't involve the disruptions to the LEP that the site does. And yeah, although it's been a very difficult decision, I wish to thank Councillor Hollywood for all of her work on it, and I concur that we are making a correct decision in this matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hua. Any other councillors wish to speak? There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Councillor Hollywood's motion. I think I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we are now an hour and a half into the meeting. We only have two further items, but I am going to suggest at an hour and a half in, it's appropriate that I call a 5-minute break. So it is now 9:05. I'd ask councillors to return to their chairs at 9:10, whereupon I'll resume the meeting, and we should only have about 15 minutes left after that. Thank you. All right, is the live streaming still underway?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Storm. Councillors, I'd ask you to turn your cameras back on. I'm just going to do a call of quorum. I have Councillor Van Opdorp, Councillor Hollywood, myself, that's 3, Councillor Redshaw's 4, Councillor Miles is 5, Sage, Councillor Sage, Councillor Fisher, Westphal, I have a quorum. All right, so we'll now move to item number 34. Councillor Hollywood, your notice of motions. Move Councillor Hollywood, seconded Councillor West. Councillor Hollywood has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. There was actually an additional point of wording which I don't think actually got circulated, but it's not huge. It's just an insert in relation to point 4 of saying that that we also consider a footpath along
Yes.
Horton Road.
It's noted.
So if that can be just noted, it's written. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight was just for the benefit of the other councillors, that the Ward 2 councillors received a petition, a copy of the petition last Friday, a formal copy that's mentioned in the notice of motion that we would try and get this copy. So that has been submitted to council and will be, I guess, tabled within the précis of correspondence with the next business papers or whatever we normally do with that. We would have had it handed tonight, but we couldn't do that because we're meeting virtually. Yeah, so really that's why I've pulled it out, is really just to move that additional set of words around the footpath. So I think the actual notice of motion is fairly self-explanatory.
Yes.
So happy to just leave it at that.
Thank you. The minutes will reflect those additions. The Executive Officer and I will liaise on that, but I think you've expressed them well. It's been circulated, well articulated. Does the seconder, Councillor West, wish to speak?
Not at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor West. There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Item number 35, précis of correspondence. Councillor Hollywood, you wish to move the précis?
I do.
Move Councillor Hollywood, seconded Councillor Fisher. Councillor Hollywood has the call. And you'll have to go off mute, Councillor Hollywood.
We'll have to go off mute if I'm going to talk. Yes, that's right. I just wanted to highlight in the précis of correspondence that there is actually there's 2 significant letters for Ward 2, but one is particularly, well, they're both significant, but one is about Woodford and saying that we will be the intention for the New South Wales government, Transport for New South Wales, to not remove the bridge. And so I want to pay tribute to the tremendous advocacy from our community, the Woodford community in particular, and also the work of council staff and the numerous notices of motion. But I, in particular, wanted to highlight, because I do think it's significant and want to foreshadow potentially bringing forward a motion around the pedestrian safety at the level crossing and so in Falconbridge. The letter actually indicates that Transport for New South Wales is keen to work with council on looking at what pedestrian safety improvements might need to be made. So that is positive. It's certainly not a full win, but at least it gives us a important platform. Sorry, forgive the pun, but an important opportunity for us to be able to speak further with Transport for New South Wales. So again, I would like to thank the Falconbridge community for their advocacy in relation to that, and I'm sure that there will be more to come. So I know that we don't normally speak to the précis of correspondence, but I would like to acknowledge not only that those letters have gone out, but also that we've received very positive responses. So I thank the council staff as well for their work on that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hollywood. Does the second, Councillor Fisher, wish to speak to the précis of correspondence? No?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Any other councillors wish to speak to the précis of correspondence? No, there's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Executive Officer, I think, do I have any urgency motions that I've not yet dealt with?
No, Mr Mayor, there were no urgencies tonight submitted to me.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Executive Officer. Can you confirm, Executive Officer, that brings us to the end of the business paper? Yes, it does. Thank you.
It does.
Thank you. Ms Kavanagh, can I just seek your contentment with the omnibus motion? Is there any issues for you arising from that, or are you happy with where it sits?
I'm happy with where it sits.
Thank you very much, Ms Kavanagh, and thank you for your support tonight in the meeting. Can I also thank the Executive Services team? Councillors, we'll now move to close the meeting. It's moved Councillor Christie, seconded Councillor Fell, that the meeting will close. Just in closing, councillors, provided Omicron and COVID-19 allows it, it's my intention that the council will meet in person next meeting, the March meeting. And so those councillors who were elected for the first time will be able to physically take their seats for the first time. And I know that's a significant occasion. Anyone wish to speak to the closure of the meeting? No? Good. I'll therefore put the motion that we close the meeting. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Councillors, I bid you all a fond good night. Staff, my thanks. To the community, good night. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Good night, everyone.
I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Toby, you can stop the streaming. Thank you.